Hey everyone, today we're jumping right into the science of life itself. We're going to break down the fundamental principles that connect every single living thing on our planet. From the tiniest microbe all the way up to the most massive whale.
So let's kick things off with a little bit of a riddle. What do you, a housefly, and a mushroom have in common? I mean, on the surface, they seem like they're from completely different worlds, right? But what if I told you they share some really, really deep connections?
Well, believe it or not, they do. Despite all their differences, size, shape, how they live, they are all playing by the exact same biological rulebook. And that is the core idea we're going to dive into today. Okay, so to really understand these rules, we've got to start with the science that figured them out in the first place. Let's start with the biggest picture possible. What exactly is biology?
Well, the word itself kind of gives us the answer. It comes from two Greek words, bios, which means life, and logos, which means knowledge. So you put them together, and biology is literally the study of life, the study of all living things, which scientists call organisms. And that brings us right back to that shared rule book we were talking about. See, to be considered alive, an organism has to check a few key boxes. It needs to eat, it needs to breathe, it needs to get rid of waste, and of course, move, grow, react to things, and make more of itself. These are pretty much the non-negotiable rules for the game of life.
All right, so we've got the rules of the game down.
Now let's zoom way, way in and look at the tiny, fundamental building block that makes all of this possible. We're shifting from the big idea of life down to its smallest working part.
And here it is, the cell. This is the starting point for pretty much all life as we know it. And what you're seeing here are the two major players, a plant cell and an animal cell. Now, they've got some stuff in common, for sure, but it's their differences that really make plants and animals, well, plants and animals.
And this is where those key differences really pop. Look at the plant cell. It's got that rigid cell wall, which is kind of like its skeleton, giving it structure. And see those green things? Those are chloroplasts. They're basically tiny solar panels, turning sunlight into food. Animal cells, on the other hand, don't have that wall, which makes them more flexible. And instead of making their own food, they have to store energy from the food they eat.
Okay, so if the cell is the basic unit, how do you get from one single building block to something as complex as a human being? Well, it all happens by stacking them up, level by level.
Just think about it like building with Legos, right? A single cell is your one little brick. You snap a bunch of similar cells together, and boom, you've got a tissue. That's like building a small wall. Then you combine different kinds of tissues to do a specific job. And now you've got an organ, like the heart. Put a few organs together that work as a team, and you've got an organ system. And finally, when all those systems are working together in harmony, you've got the whole thing, a complete organism.
All right, so we've kind of done a full journey, haven't we? We went from the big picture of life, zoomed down to the microscopic cell, and then built our way back up to a full organism. So now let's zoom all the way out. I mean, with millions and millions of different living things on this planet, how did scientists ever come up with a way to keep track of it all without going crazy?
Well, the person we really have to thank for tackling that huge challenge was a Swedish scientist named Carl Linnaeus. Back in the 1700s, he came up with this brilliant logical system for naming and grouping organisms. You can basically think of him as the guy who created the first library card catalog for all of life. And this is his system, which, by the way, we still use the basics of today. It's a hierarchy with 7 major levels. You start super broad at the top with kingdom, and with each step down, you get more and more specific, until you're left with just one unique species. And hey, here's a helpful little trick to remember the order. Kids play cards on fairly good sides. Kingdom, phylum, class, you get the idea. Okay, let's put this system into action so you can see how it works. Let's take us, a human, a honeybee, and a corn plant. Now, at the top, the human and the honeybee are both in the animal kingdom, while the corn is, obviously, in the plant kingdom. But as you go down each step, you can see how they start to split off into more and more exclusive clubs, right? Until you get all the way down to that unique 2-part scientific name at the bottom that belongs only to them.
All right, for our last little section here, let's do a quick tour of that very top level category, the 5 major kingdoms that scientists use to sort basically all known life.
First up, we've got Kingdom Munera. This is the kingdom of bacteria. We're talking about super simple, single-celled organisms. And yeah, they might be microscopic, but don't let their size fool you. These guys are everywhere and are absolutely critical for life on this planet.
The other 4 kingdoms really complete the whole picture. Next, you've got Protoctista, which is kind of this diverse grab bag group that includes stuff like algae and amoebas.
Then there's kingdom fungi. These are the planet's great decomposers, like mushrooms and yeasts. And finally, you have the two kingdoms we're probably most familiar with. Plantae, the plants making their own food, and Animalia, the animals that have to eat other things, which of course is where we fit in.
So there you have it. We've looked at the basic rules of being alive, the tiny cells that make it all happen, and the really elegant system we've designed to organize it all. But all of this brings up one final, really fascinating question, doesn't it? For all the millions of species we've already cataloged, what else is still out there? In the deepest parts of the ocean or the most remote jungles, just waiting to be discovered?